The sun was high over the desert, casting long shadows across the dunes, and the wind carried fine grains of sand that stung the explorers' faces. A small team of archaeologists had journeyed far from the nearest settlement, drawn by rumors of a strange ruin hidden deep in this unforgiving landscape. Among them was Ethan, a young scientist with a sharp mind and an insatiable curiosity. He had spent his whole life fascinated by ancient mysteries and the possibility that humans were not alone in the universe. Every time he saw a strange artifact, he felt a surge of excitement that made his heart race. The ruins appeared almost suddenly, as if the desert itself had been keeping them hidden until the team arrived. Towering structures rose from the sand, their surfaces etched with symbols no one recognized. The stone walls were darkened by age, yet certain sections shimmered faintly, catching the sunlight in a way that made them look alive. Dr. Leora, the team's leader and a seasoned researcher with decades of experience, approached with caution. Her eyes scanned the ruins, her mind recalling legends of civilizations that had vanished long ago. She had studied stories of alien artifacts and knew that objects from other worlds could be dangerous if disturbed. Ethan, however, was captivated. He moved closer to one particular object that lay partially buried in sand, a suit of armor unlike anything he had ever seen. Its surface gleamed with a strange metallic light that seemed to shift as he moved. The armor was intricately designed, each plate engraved with patterns that pulsed faintly, almost as if they were breathing. It was both beautiful and intimidating. For Ethan, the sight of it filled him with awe. He had always dreamed of finding something extraordinary, and here it was, right in front of him. Dr. Leora's voice broke through his thoughts. "Ethan, don't touch it," she said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her tone carried a mix of warning and urgency. "We don't know what it is or how it works. Some artifacts are not just old. They are alive in ways we cannot understand. One wrong move and we could all be in danger." Ethan nodded quickly, but the pull of curiosity was too strong. He could feel a strange energy emanating from the armor, a warmth that seemed to reach out to him. He crouched down, examining the symbols more closely. They glowed faintly under his fingertips, though he hadn't touched them yet. His mind raced with possibilities. Maybe this armor had belonged to a guardian, a warrior of an alien civilization. Maybe it had been waiting for someone like him, someone brave enough to approach it. He glanced at Dr. Leora, who was carefully scanning the surrounding ruins, making sure nothing else in the area posed a threat. Seeing her occupied gave Ethan the confidence to take a small step closer. He reached out tentatively, letting his fingers hover just above the surface of the armor. It felt cooler than he expected, almost like metal that had been chilled to perfection. But as soon as he touched it, a shiver ran up his arm. The armor responded in a way that startled him. The plates shifted slightly under his touch, moving as though they were alive. A soft hum filled the air, almost musical, vibrating through the ground and his body. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. He had never felt anything like this before. The energy was not dangerous at first, but it was insistent, almost as if it recognized him. "Ethan!" Dr. Leora's voice cut sharply through the hum. She was running toward him now, her face pale with concern. "Stop! I warned you!" But it was too late. The armor reacted immediately. Thin lines of light spread across its surface, reaching out and wrapping around his hand, then his wrist. Before he could pull away, the energy seemed to flow into him, creating a bond that he could not break. Panic surged as he tried to free himself, but the armor moved with him, responding to his every motion. It was no longer just an object. It was something alive, something aware. The rest of the team gathered around, their eyes wide with shock. Some whispered prayers, others tried to approach, but no one dared touch it. Ethan could feel the energy coursing through him, not harmful, but intense. It was as if the armor was testing him, gauging his strength, his intentions. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Dr. Leora knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his shoulders. "It's alive, Ethan. You have to stay calm. Don't fight it. Listen to me. It reacts to fear and struggle. If you panic, it could..." hurt you, or worse." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her fear. She had seen strange things in her career, but nothing like this. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He focused on the hum, on the patterns of light that danced across the armor. Slowly, he felt a connection forming, not just physically, but mentally. It was as if the armor was probing his thoughts, trying to understand him, and he was doing the same with it. A strange sensation of trust began to form, delicate but undeniable. Hours seemed to pass as the team worked around him, carefully observing every reaction. Ethan's body was exhausted, but his mind was alive with questions. How old was this armor? Who had worn it before? Was it meant to be protective, or was it a weapon? And most importantly, what did it want from him? By the end of the day, the desert sun dipped low, casting long orange shadows across the ruins. Ethan remained bound to the armor, but the initial panic had subsided, replaced by a cautious curiosity. He had survived the first contact, and he realized that this was not just an accident of fate. The armor had chosen him, and whether he was ready or not, his life had just changed forever. Dr. Leora sat beside him as the team packed up for the night, her mind racing with theories and plans. She knew the journey ahead would be dangerous, and the answers they sought might be beyond human understanding. But she also knew one thing for certain. This was a discovery that could change everything. For Ethan, the adventure had just begun, and he could feel it deep in his bones, entwined with the strange living armor that refused to let go. The night fell over the desert, bringing with it a cold that seeped through every layer of clothing. The team had set up a small camp near the ruins, and a fire crackled softly in the center, offering some warmth. But warmth did little to calm the tension that gripped everyone. Ethan sat near the fire, the armor still fused to his body, glowing faintly in the darkness. It was as if the suit itself was aware of the shadows, the cold, and the quiet whispers of the desert night. The first few hours after the armor bonded to Ethan had been terrifying. He had tried to pull it off, to remove it in any way he could imagine, but it did not budge. Each movement he made was met with resistance, as if the armor anticipated his actions. Even when he tried to stay completely still, it pulsed lightly, reminding him that it was alive and aware. Panic had initially taken hold, his heart pounding and thoughts racing in every direction. But slowly, as the minutes stretched into hours, he began to sense something else, a strange rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, syncing with his own. Dr. Leora and the rest of the team watched him carefully. They were experts in archaeology, but nothing in their training had prepared them for this. Tools, wires, even attempts to apply force had failed. The armor resisted every approach without harming Ethan. It was as if it was testing them, testing him. Leora knelt beside him, her hands hovering near the glowing plates. She studied the inscriptions and patterns, looking for any hint of how it might be removed safely. Her mind raced, connecting dots from alien texts she had seen in her research. She murmured quietly to herself, trying to remember every warning, every legend that spoke of artifacts with minds of their own. Ethan, meanwhile, had begun to notice changes in his own body. Movements that had felt impossible earlier now seemed easier, almost instinctive. He could lift heavier objects without strain, and his reflexes were sharper. It was as if the armor was not just binding to him physically, but enhancing him, making him stronger, more aware. At first this was frightening. He worried that the armor might be controlling him, using his body for its own purposes. But gradually, he began to realize that it was listening, learning from him and responding to him. The night deepened and the wind rose, whistling through the ruins. Shadows danced on the walls and the fire flickered, casting strange shapes that seemed almost alive. Ethan's mind began to wander, and with it came visions. At first they were flashes, a city of shining towers, strange beings moving gracefully, battles fought long before humans had walked the earth. Then came sounds, voices speaking in a language he did not understand, yet somehow felt familiar. It was disorienting and thrilling at the same time. He tried to speak, to ask the armor what it wanted, but no words came. Instead, he felt an understanding forming, an unspoken connection. The other team members, though cautious, began to notice subtle changes in Ethan. His eyes, which had once been wide with fear, now held a steady focus. His movements were controlled, precise, almost graceful. They saw him reach for a simple tool, and the armor adjusted as if to help him, guiding his actions without force. It was not complete control, but a partnership forming. Dr. Leora took notes, realizing that the bond between Ethan and the armor was unique. She had read stories of intelligent alien artifacts, but never had she imagined witnessing one firsthand. Despite the growing bond, there was still fear. Ethan sometimes woke from sudden flashes of energy, his body tense, the armor glowing brighter than usual. In those moments, it seemed to resist him, testing his resolve. He learned quickly that panic was dangerous. The more he struggled, the tighter the armor clung, and the more intense the energy pulses became. Leora instructed him to breathe, to slow his mind, and to approach the experience with calm. It was an unusual method, but over time, it proved effective. As the hours passed, Ethan discovered small ways to interact with the armor. He could sense when it wanted to shift, when a plate moved slightly in response to his intention. Tiny adjustments became easier, movements smoother. It was still uncomfortable. He could not remove the armor, could not lie down without the plates pressing against him. But he began to adapt. He found ways to sit, to rest, and to move without triggering the armor's defensive reactions. The relationship was cautious, built on observation and patience, but it was growing. By the second night, something remarkable happened. Ethan experienced what could only be described as communication, not in words, but in feelings and images. He saw the ruins not just as crumbling stone, but as a living memory of a civilization long gone. He felt the history of the armor. Battles, fought to defend, choices made to protect. A desire to ensure survival and knowledge were preserved. It was overwhelming, yet enlightening. The armor was teaching him, showing him glimpses of a past that humans could never know alone. The team remained close, assisting carefully and documenting everything. They were cautious, understanding the danger, but also awed by what they witnessed. Dr. Leora realized that the armor's bond with Ethan was a rare phenomenon, one that might never be repeated. The artifact had chosen its bearer, and there was nothing they could do to break that connection without risking harm. Instead, they shifted their focus, understanding, observing, and learning. Every reaction, every pulse of light, every movement became data to be studied. Ethan, despite the discomfort and fear, began to feel a strange sense of purpose. The armor was no longer a burden alone. It was a challenge, a partner, and a guide. He learned to move carefully, to anticipate its shifts, and even to sense when it was thinking, if such a word could describe it. Each day brought new discoveries, physical, mental, and emotional. The once terrifying experience now held the promise of something extraordinary, something beyond human comprehension. As dawn approached on the third day, the desert light revealed the ruins in sharp relief. The armor on Ethan's body shimmered faintly in the morning sun, reflecting not just light but knowledge and energy he could not yet explain. He stood up slowly, testing his balance and strength, feeling the armor adjust with him seamlessly. He realized that his life had changed in a way he could never have imagined. The adventure had only just begun, and the challenges ahead would test him in ways beyond fear and curiosity. Dr. Leora looked at him, both worried and amazed. "You're changing," she said softly, almost to herself. "Not just physically. Everything about you is different. We have to understand this before it goes too far." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth in her words. The armor was alive, intelligent, and now an inseparable part of him. It demanded patience, understanding, and courage. And deep down he knew that escaping its influence, at least for now, was impossible. But he also knew that if he learned to work with it, he might gain knowledge, strength, and insight that no human had ever known. The desert stretched endlessly around them, silent except for the wind and the faint hum of the armor. Night was fading, but the story of Ethan and the ancient alien armor was just beginning. And as the sun climbed higher, the bond between human and artifact grew stronger, mysterious, and impossible to ignore. The days that followed were some of the most challenging Ethan had ever faced. The armor remained firmly bonded to his body, and despite his growing familiarity with it, he could not remove it. Every movement required adjustment, and simple tasks, like eating or sleeping, became complex exercises in coordination. The plates shifted with him, sometimes helping, sometimes resisting, always reminding him of the strange power that now shared his body. The team had returned to their research base, carrying Ethan carefully. Scientists, engineers, and medical specialists gathered to examine him and the armor. They ran scans, measured energy readings, and tested every possible method to detach the suit. But the armor remained immovable, its energy undisturbed by any human intervention. Every tool, every chemical, even attempts to disrupt it with electricity had no effect. It was as though the armor had chosen Ethan, and nothing human could force it to let go. At first, this frustrated Ethan. He wanted to be free, to remove the heavy, shining plates that had become part of him. The suit restricted his movements, in ways he had never imagined. Sitting for long periods caused discomfort, bending over became awkward, and even walking required careful attention. Yet despite the inconvenience, he began noticing advantages he hadn't expected. His strength had increased. He could lift heavier objects with ease. His reflexes were sharper, his senses more acute. Small things, like hearing distant footsteps or seeing subtle movements in shadows, became easier. Dr. Leora observed these changes with a mixture of caution and fascination. "It's enhancing you," she said quietly one evening as she reviewed scans of Ethan's body. "The armor is not just protective, it's teaching you, adapting to you, and possibly preparing you for something we don't understand yet." Her words both comforted and unnerved him. The idea of enhancement was exciting, but the thought that he might be changing in ways beyond control was unsettling. Ethan began to test the limits of the armor. At first, it was small actions, lifting objects, moving quickly, adjusting to its weight. Gradually, he learned to anticipate how the plates shifted with his movements. The armor seemed to respond to his intentions, not forcing him, but guiding him. He discovered that it could react defensively, pushing back against pressure or protecting him from minor injuries. This newfound control brought confidence, yet he knew he could never fully predict the armor's reactions. At night, he continued to experience visions and flashes of memories, not his own but from the armor's previous experiences. He saw alien landscapes, strange cities, and beings with advanced technology. Battles, not unlike war stories in human history, played out before his mind's eye. He felt the courage, the fear, and the determination of those who had worn the armor long ago. These visions were vivid and often overwhelming, but they also offered insight. The armor was not just an object, it was a record of an entire civilization, their struggles, and their victories. The team realized that traditional approaches to removing the armor were pointless. Instead, they shifted focus toward understanding it, learning how it worked, and observing Ethan's adaptation. Leora translated the alien symbols etched into the plates, uncovering fragments of information about the armor's origin. According to her research, the armor had been worn by a warrior class of an alien civilization, designed to bond with a chosen bearer. It enhanced physical abilities, provided protection, and connected the wearer to the memories and experiences of its previous users. But the texts also carried a warning. The armor would only release its bearer when the purpose it was meant to fulfill was complete. Ethan found himself thinking about the meaning of that warning. Was there a task he had to accomplish? A mission he had yet to discover? It was both a burden and a challenge. Each day brought new lessons. He learned how to move silently despite the weight of the plates, how to use the enhanced strength without exhausting himself, and how to anticipate the subtle shifts in the armor as it responded to his emotions. He realized that patience and observation were essential. Forcing the armor would only lead to struggle and frustration. Over time, he began to form a connection that was almost conversational, not through words but through understanding. If he moved cautiously, the armor responded smoothly. If he approached a task with confidence, it assisted. If he panicked, it resisted. It was as though the armor had a mind of its own, yet it was teaching him discipline, awareness, and adaptability. The process was gradual, demanding and exhausting, but it also filled him with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. During this period, the armor's influence extended beyond the physical. Ethan's senses became sharper. He could hear subtle sounds in distant rooms, feel slight vibrations in the floor, and even sense changes in the energy around him. It was like living in a heightened reality, where the ordinary world seemed sharper, clearer, and more immediate. While this made some aspects of life easier, it also made everything more intense. Noise, movement, and even thoughts became amplified. Learning to manage this new perception became a daily practice. The team also noticed changes in Ethan's behavior. He was calmer, more focused, and more deliberate in his actions. He listened carefully, thought before reacting, and displayed patience he had not possessed before. Leora wondered if these changes were caused solely by the armor, or if they were part of the adaptation process, the armor teaching him discipline and control as much as it enhanced his body. Either way, the bond between human and artifact was deepening in ways no one could fully explain. One afternoon, as Ethan practiced lifting and balancing with the armor, a sudden flash of insight struck him. He realized that the armor's intelligence was not hostile. It was protective. It was guiding him, showing him possibilities and teaching him how to work as one with it. The realization brought relief and focus. He began experimenting with more complex movements, testing the limits of strength, agility, and coordination. Each success brought a sense of accomplishment, each failure a lesson in patience. As the weeks passed, the initial panic and frustration faded, replaced by determination and curiosity. Ethan became a student of the armor, learning not only about its abilities but also about its history. He understood that this was no ordinary discovery. It was a connection to a civilization far older and more advanced than humanity. He felt a responsibility to respect the armor, to learn from it, and to discover the purpose it had for him. Dr. Leora watched closely, her own fascination growing. "You're the first human to bond with it," she remarked one evening. "No one has ever had this opportunity, or this responsibility. If you handle it carefully, you could gain knowledge and experience that no one else could." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The armor was not just a challenge, it was a doorway to something extraordinary. The journey was just beginning. Ethan had survived the initial struggle, learned to move with the armor, and discovered hints of its intelligence. The challenges ahead were unclear, but he was no longer afraid. With patience, observation, and determination, he knew he could learn to live with the armor, understand its purpose, and perhaps uncover the secrets of the civilization that had created it. Each day was a lesson, each movement a test, and each vision a glimpse into a world far beyond human understanding. The bond between human and armor grew stronger with each passing day, a partnership of strength, intelligence, and trust. Ethan had learned that survival depended not on resistance but on adaptation, and as he looked out over the horizon, he understood that this journey was more than a challenge. It was the beginning of a transformation that would change him forever. Ethan's life had transformed completely. The armor, once a source of fear and frustration, had become a constant presence, a teacher, and a guide. Each morning he awoke feeling the suit's subtle hum against his skin, as if it were breathing alongside him. The plates shifted slightly as he moved, adapting instantly to his body. Over the weeks he had learned how to anticipate its movements, and in turn the armor seemed to respond more fluidly to his intentions. Together, they had become a single, coordinated unit. Dr. Leora watched in awe as he trained in the facility's open area. He moved with a grace that was almost inhuman, the plates sliding and flexing as though made from liquid metal. He could leap higher, run faster, and withstand impacts that would have injured him before. Yet despite the armor's strength, it demanded control. Each exercise was as much about discipline and focus as it was about physical ability. If he lost concentration, even for a moment the armor would stiffen, reminding him that it required cooperation, not force. The visions that had once been fleeting flashes now came more clearly. Ethan saw vast alien cities built on mountains of crystal, spacecraft moving silently between stars, and warriors clad in armor much like his own, fighting to protect their civilizations. These experiences were not dreams. They were memories, encoded in the armor, glimpses into a past that had long been forgotten by humans. He felt their courage, their fear, and their determination as if it were his own, and each vision taught him a lesson about patience, strategy, and resilience. Over time, Ethan realized the armor did more than enhance his body. It enhanced his mind. His senses sharpened, his reflexes became almost preternatural, and he began to understand the subtle energy patterns emitted by the suit. He could anticipate movements before they happened and detect slight shifts in the environment around him. Even human technology seemed to respond differently to him now. Electronic devices reacted in strange ways, and computers that had once puzzled him were suddenly easier to understand. The armor seemed to be expanding his perception, connecting him to the world in ways he could barely describe. Dr. Leora continued her research, translating the alien inscriptions etched across the armor's plates. The texts described a warrior, caste that had protected knowledge, technology, and civilizations across countless worlds. The armor was not merely defensive, it was a record of experience, a living library encoded with the memories of those who had worn it. Ethan realized that the armor was teaching him not only how to survive, but also how to carry forward the wisdom of a civilization far older and wiser than humanity. The bond deepened when Ethan discovered he could interface with certain alien devices. By touching them, the armor reacted, lighting up in response, forming connections that allowed him to manipulate technology with his thoughts. It was a delicate process, requiring focus and patience, but it demonstrated the extent to which the armor could amplify his abilities. Every experiment brought new discoveries, and with each success he felt a growing sense of responsibility. This was no longer just a personal experience. He was now a bridge between humanity and a lost alien culture. Despite the increasing control and understanding, challenges remained. The armor required constant attention. Rest was difficult. Even sleep was accompanied by faint pulses of energy and visions of distant worlds. Meals and hygiene took longer as he adjusted to the constraints of the plates. Social interactions were awkward. His friends and colleagues treated him with a mixture of awe and caution, unsure how to relate to someone so dramatically changed. Ethan accepted these difficulties as part of the process. The armor was teaching him patience, endurance, and humility. It demanded focus, and in return, it offered knowledge, protection, and insight that no human had ever experienced before. 1. Evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan felt a sudden surge of energy. The armor glowed brightly, almost as if it were alive in a new way. He instinctively raised his hands, and the air around him seemed to vibrate. The energy flowed through him, not painfully but powerfully. He realized the armor had unlocked a new capability, one that allowed him to manipulate energy fields, influence objects at a distance, and interact with technology as if it were an extension of himself. It was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. Dr. Leora watched in amazement. This is beyond anything we've seen before, she whispered. The armor is showing you its full potential. You are no longer just wearing it. You are part of it. Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The armor had become more than a tool, more than protection. It was now a symbiotic partner, a source of guidance, power, and knowledge. Ethan trained tirelessly, learning to control this new energy. Every day was a test of concentration, patience, and ingenuity. Mistakes were inevitable, but the armor corrected him gently, offering feedback through vibrations, light pulses, and subtle shifts. With each adjustment, he became stronger, faster, and more aware. The armor's power was immense, but it required harmony. Force alone would never be enough. Only understanding and cooperation allowed its full potential to emerge. By the end of the month, Ethan had transformed. He moved with precision and confidence, could sense subtle changes in the environment, and could manipulate energy in ways that had once seemed impossible. He had learned to live with the armor, adapt to its presence, and even communicate with it in a way that was almost intuitive. The bond was complete. He was no longer merely a human wearing alien armor. He was a new kind of being, one that combined human ingenuity with alien technology, intelligence, and experience. As he gazed at the sunset from the research facility, Ethan understood the truth. The armor had chosen him for a reason. It demanded respect, patience, and understanding, but in return it offered insight, protection, and power that no one else could wield. The challenges ahead were unknown, but he was ready. With the armor as his guide, he could face anything, and he knew that his life and the lives of those around him would never be the same again. Time moved differently for Ethan now. The days blended into weeks, and his bond with the armor grew stronger and more intuitive. By now he could move almost effortlessly, the plates shifting smoothly with every motion, every leap, every gesture. Every small task was a demonstration of harmony between human and artifact. Yet, despite the mastery he had gained, a sense of anticipation lingered. The armor had more to reveal, and Ethan felt it in every pulse, every subtle vibration against his skin. The alien visions continued, more vivid than ever. Ethan saw entire civilizations, their cities of shimmering metal and light stretching across alien landscapes. He witnessed acts of bravery, struggles against overwhelming odds, and the complex politics of species far older than humanity. Each memory carried lessons: discipline, courage, strategy, and compassion. The armor was not merely enhancing him physically, it was imparting knowledge, shaping his understanding of leadership, responsibility, and purpose. Dr. Leora worked tirelessly alongside him. She documented every change, every ability, every reaction. Together they explored the limits of the armor's power. Ethan could now influence energy fields, manipulate alien devices with his thoughts, and anticipate threats with remarkable accuracy. But she noticed something deeper. The armor seemed to be evaluating his character, not just his physical or mental capabilities. It tested his patience, his courage, and his integrity. Every success strengthened the bond. Every mistake offered a lesson. One evening, the armor reacted in an unexpected way. A surge of energy enveloped Ethan, brighter and more intense than ever before. The plates formed intricate patterns, glowing with a rhythm that mirrored his heartbeat. In that moment, he realized the armor was offering him a choice. He could merge fully, embracing the armor's powers completely, but he would never be able to remove it. Alternatively, he could attempt a dangerous procedure to separate the armor, which could damage both him and the artifact. Ethan considered the options carefully. Merging completely would grant him unmatched strength, knowledge, and abilities, but it would mean leaving behind a part of his humanity. Separation was risky and uncertain, and might undo everything the armor had taught him. After long reflection, he chose the path of trust and acceptance. He decided to respect the armor's will to work with it rather than against it. The transformation was profound. Ethan felt the armor integrate fully with his body, not as a burden but as an extension of himself. Every movement was seamless, every ability enhanced. He could sense distant energy, react instantly to threats, and manipulate technology in ways that once seemed impossible. The visions of alien worlds became clearer, not just memories but guides, lessons in strategy, ethics, and leadership. He felt the weight of responsibility but also the clarity of purpose. Dr. Leora observed silently, awestruck. "You've become a bridge," she whispered, "between worlds, between knowledge, and between civilizations." Ethan nodded, understanding. that this journey was far larger than himself. The armor had chosen him not just for survival, but to carry forward lessons from a civilization long gone. He realized that his life would now be devoted to learning, protecting, and sharing this knowledge responsibly. Ethan's transformation was not only physical and mental, but also emotional. He felt a connection to the past, to the beings who had created the armor, and to humanity. The armor was alive, intelligent, and purposeful, and in embracing it, he had become a new kind of human, one capable of understanding worlds beyond his own, one capable of extraordinary insight and power, yet guided by wisdom and responsibility. The desert, the ruins, and the research facility all faded into a new reality. Ethan and the armor were no longer separate entities. They were one. Together, they embodied strength, knowledge, and guidance. The journey that had begun with curiosity and fear had led to mastery, understanding, and transformation. And as he gazed at the horizon, Ethan knew one truth. His life had changed forever, and the armor had chosen him for a reason. He was no longer just Ethan, the young scientist. He was the human chosen by a civilization long gone, a guardian of knowledge and a bridge between worlds. And with the living armor as his partner, he was ready to face any challenge, discover any secret, and protect the wisdom of both humanity and the alien past.